Joining us now, former Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Rocah. She's a distinguished fellow in criminal justice at Pace School of Law and an MSNBC legal analyst. And legal analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, and former federal prosecutor Wiley. Mimi and Maya are two of 5 NBC News legal analysts who have written a new NBC think piece entitled "The Allegations Against Brett Kavanaugh Are Not Simply a He Said, She Said Situation," in which they call for an independent investigation ahead of Ford and Kavanaugh possibly testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Also with us for this conversation, former GOP counsel for the House Oversight Committee, now a contributor to NBCNews.com's editorial page Think, Sophia Nelson. Good to have you all on board. Maya, and then Mimi, we'll start with you. Why should there be an investigation at this point, given all the legal challenges to trying to prove a case like this, if you call it a case?
Well, certainly,
Maya, go first.
Certainly, it's important, number one, because we're talking about the highest legal position in the land that has significant power and authority, including lawmaking on issues that relate to exactly the kind of allegations that are coming before us now, meaning what is the nature of the law when it comes to some of the cases that we might see before the Supreme Court. You want someone in this position who has the highest degree of integrity. And so any allegation that suggests that a person who's being considered for the Supreme Court of the United States, we should know and understand exactly what kind of person we're going to have, including whether or not they obey the law, since that's what they're sworn to uphold. In this case, the question isn't whether or not there's going to be a criminal investigation in the sense of whether he will serve any jail time. The issue is whether or not he is telling the truth on a very, very serious allegation. And frankly, there are a lot of tools available to law enforcement to determine whether or not there's any more evidence. But I think the important thing here is the fact that there is corroboration, in the sense that in 2012, before Brett Kavanaugh was ever being considered for a Supreme Court seat, that she actually told someone what happened in exactly the same way, for the most part, with only a few differences, but for the most part the same story that she's telling now, with very, very little to gain. And that's the kind of thing we look at when we look at veracity and evidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know any woman who would want to come forward with something like this. Certainly not much to gain at all. But Mimi, what are the challenges? Are there challenges to this, given the timing of the said event?
Yeah, Mika, absolutely there's challenges. But, you know, prosecutors, investigators face challenges all the time of varying degrees, and they don't just throw up their hands and say, well, we can't figure it out, so let's move on.
But aren't there statutes of limitations for a reason, especially in cases that are 30, 35 years old and happened when someone was in their formative years? I mean, I just have to push back. Every legal expert that we've had on says there's no legal remedy for this. Are you guys saying there is? That there's a case and he could be arrested?
No, absolutely not. As Maya said, this is not about a criminal investigation. This is about a serious allegation that, well, our point of our article was, it has the ring of truth to us because of things we already know in the public record. The fact that she gave a consistent statement to her therapist, the fact that her story, if she was going to make it up, why would she put Mark Judge at the scene? Why would she put a witness there who, is in all likelihood going to contradict her because he's a friend of Kavanaugh's? What would her motive be for coming forward? She does not appear to be a political woman. Why would she put herself through what she predicted would happen and is happening? So what we were saying is her story has the ring of truth. And so when you have not just any allegation, but what seems to be a credible allegation, you investigate it. You look into it because you need to know, did this happen? And you can make people can make their own decisions about whether that means he should be a Supreme Court justice if it happened, and is he lying now, and should that affect his ability to become a Supreme Court justice? So that's the point of our article, and that's why we think an investigation should be done. And what the Republicans are offering to do right now is a total sham. They want to throw her up there. They've already made up their mind. I mean, remember, President Trump won't go sit with Robert Mueller for an interview because he thinks it's a perjury trap. But this woman is supposed to go in front of judges, meaning the senators, who have basically already decided she's lying. You know, that's just the height of hypocrisy, I think.
I completely hear you. I want to get now to Sophia Nelson. You've got a different take on this. Sophia, go ahead.
Well, I think a couple things. One, there is precedent, Mika, with the Thomas and Hill hearings that after the allegations were made that Anita Hill said she was sexually harassed by then Judge Thomas, the FBI took a 2-week time frame. They got witnesses, they talked to people, and then they came back and they testified. So that's the first thing that's important. There's precedent. But where we have a problem here, and I have a big problem, is Judge Kavanaugh is saying he wasn't even there. Now, to me, I believe that something awful has happened to Dr. Ford. I don't think she's making this up. I don't think women lie about these things. So let's get that out the way. The challenge that we have is 36 years later, where do you go for witnesses? She doesn't even remember the house that the party happened in. These are the things that investigators, if it's going to be credible, right, they've got to get witnesses. There's no DNA that I can figure how they collect any DNA here. And this is more than just sexually harassing, like Anita Hill said about Clarence Thomas and saying ugly, disgusting things. This is about an alleged sexual assault or rape. So you've got to have some type of physical evidence. There have to be witnesses. And I think on Twitter just a few moments ago before I came on, there's another person that was named as possibly being there, another man, and he says it didn't happen or that he wasn't at the party. And you have to check the name on that because I didn't look at it carefully. I'm just making a point that I don't know how the FBI conducts a credible investigation given 36 years down the road, and who do they talk to and what do they do? I'm not saying they shouldn't try. I just don't know how you get to who did what here. That's the problem.
So maybe let me ask you that question. I mean, because 35, 36 years ago, you've got two people who were allegedly in the room when this happened. Both of them actually say nothing like this happened. You have Dr. Ford, who said something did happen, but she doesn't know where it happened. She doesn't know exactly when it happened. Again, very understandable over 35 years, and also given the trauma of the event that she said she went through. If you are in charge of this investigation, what's your first step? What do you do?
Look, Joe, there's definitely challenges, but here's what I would do. First of all, we're not talking about a needle in a haystack. This is not, wow, it happened somewhere in the world. This was a closed community, a private school. There have already been so many people on both sides, frankly, from this high school community that have come forward and said, yeah, I knew Brett Kavanaugh. Yes, I knew Dr. Blasey.
Right.
So there is a pool of people to go to. And this is what investigators do. They go out, they pound the pavement, and they start interviewing people. Was there anybody else in the room? Let's put Mark Judge aside for a second. Maybe not. Maybe there was no other person besides these three people. But there were people in the house. What happened when they came down the stairs? Who's the friend who went to the party with her? Did they leave with her, or did she, run out of there the way she said? I mean, there are ways to corroborate. This is how cases are built all the time. You don't necessarily get to, prove or corroborate the central fact, but you corroborate or debunk. If she's lying, then that should be debunked. That you corroborate or debunk the facts around the central issue. There's not going to be physical evidence from this. I disagree with what the last guest said, because this was not an attempted rape where there was penetration, as far as I know, and she never alleged that. So we're not looking for physical evidence. We're looking at witnesses. We're looking at circumstances surrounding the events. And on Mark Judge, look, his statement so far was very careful. He didn't say it didn't happen. He said he didn't remember anything like that happening. And that's a careful way of phrasing it. And that may be true, but I think there needs to be more probing. That's a statement he put out. He needs to be questioned by a trained investigator. That's what I think should happen.
Go ahead, Maya.
Mimi made one important point, many important points, but one that I want to really reinforce here, which is that this is not a situation in which there isn't an identified witness. And he said he did not remember. It's also in terms of Sophia's point about an investigation. This isn't a criminal investigation. We're talking about a FBI background check. The standard of proof is different. So it's not a question of DNA evidence, not only because it wasn't a rape allegation, it was an attempted rape allegation, but because the question is, can we establish enough of the facts to demonstrate that whether or not Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth or Professor Ford is telling the truth, right? That's the issue here, is veracity, truthfulness, credibility. And remember that in this case, since we're not talking about a criminal case, what interest does the public have in not trying to find out as much as it can in this set of circumstances? There is actually no public interest in failing to reopen an FBI background check to go and try to find out whether there's any more information we can get, including the fact, and this is also important to Sophia's point, is it's not a question of, no, one of the issues is, where was the party? She was being very honest, Professor Ford, in saying, I don't remember which party. That's actually a very honest thing for someone to say, right? If they're really making it up, they'll make up some more stuff to make it sound more credible.
One of the things
I'm sorry, Mika.
Sophia Nelson, I just wanted you to be able to jump in. I do think that pattern is always important in cases like this that draw to character and truthfulness. Do they not? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but don't you look for patterns of behavior as well if there was an investigation?
Well, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen over the past year or two with the Me Too movement is every time a powerful man is accused of these things, there are more allegations that come forth. So that's one thing that you'd want to find out. But with 6 background checks already done by the FBI, I promise you they would have heard about this by now. So 2 things. There's precedent for this. I said that. The FBI can investigate for a couple weeks and they can come back. The second thing is I was very clear to both of my colleagues that they said this was an alleged rape. I didn't say it was a rape. I've never said that. I think the allegation it's alleged rape is actually a little bit, I think we should be careful with that. I'm not sure what Dr. Ford's saying happened other than he put his hand over her mouth, which is pretty disgusting if that happened, and that he held her down. And I think another thing, Mika, I was a high school girl in the early 80s, as I think some of the others were on this panel, and I can tell you, I remember hearing stories. This stuff happened back then with people drinking and with the fact that women didn't talk about because we couldn't talk about it. And I think that it's brave of her to come forward. Something happened, but Kavanaugh's saying he wasn't there, and so I do think it's a he say, she say, and I don't know how you get beyond him saying he wasn't there and she saying he was. I don't know.
And that's what makes this conversation fascinating. Mimi Rocah, Maya Wiley, and Sophia Nelson, thank you all for coming on this morning. Still ahead, for months now, Poland has been pushing to have a U.S. military presence in order to deter Russia.